What makes the dollar so powerful? Why did the world agree to trade in dollars? Who decided to give the dollar the status of the world's reserve currency? Let's talk about a few of these things today. How did money begin? If we go back to the origins of money, prior to money, we had the barter system. Of course, the barter system had some inefficiencies. For you to get what the other person has, the other person must need what you have. So then it was realized, no, there has to be a common medium of exchange. Amazing things played the role of money in the past. Cowrie shells have been treated as money. Cattle has been treated as money. I'm told cigarette butts were considered as money at one time. Then the world discovered metal. You know, the earliest money was made from copper. If I'm not wrong, it started in Sweden. I think they had a currency that sounded very much like the dollar. It was, I think, a daler, D-A-L-E-R, I think. But the problem with copper was it is heavy. So if Sweden wanted to import something, they had to send money by ship. And the workers used to load it on the ship on their backs. And these plates were so heavy, sometimes they would slip off the backs and fall into the sea. And they couldn't fish them out. Even till date, sometimes they are fishing out those plates from the sea. Subsequently, gold was discovered. Now, gold was a wonderful metal. First of all, it's lightweight. It has a luster. It can't be destroyed. You can take a hammer and beat it. You can melt it on fire. Doesn't lose value. So then the coins were made out of gold. But it also had a disadvantage. One could be carrying a small fortune in a pouch in your pocket. So that led to crime, mugging, stealing. So what cropped up because of this was a concept called pawnbrokers. I think pawnbrokers were today's equivalent of a safe deposit locker. You have gold, go and keep it with your pawnbroker. You want to buy something? You go running to your pawnbroker, take it out, give it to this person. Now the recipient will go and put it with his pawnbroker. One day it so happened, somebody wanted to buy something and he didn't have the time to go to the pawnbroker's shop. So he gave the receipt to the seller. Why don't you go and withdraw it and take it from there? And that is how they discovered this piece of paper can play the role of money. Then government said, why don't we do that? We will keep gold aside and print money. And whenever you want, you can bring your money and we'll exchange it with gold. So that is how the gold standard got created. When you print money against a reserve of gold, that system is called the gold standard and the currency is called hard currency. But folks, I'm talking about, I think I could be wrong. I think 1700s or earlier than that also could be. A lot of development had yet to be taken place. Governments needed money. The reserve of gold was not commensurate with the requirement of money. Then governments probably decided if we want to print 100, we don't have to keep 100 of gold because everyone doesn't come every day to withdraw it. So let's keep 80 of gold and print 100. Then they said, let's keep 60. Then let's keep 40. And then one by one, the country stopped keeping gold. They started exiting the gold standard. Amongst the last countries to hang on to the gold standard was Great Britain. Even they got out just before the First World War in 1913 or so. They tried to re-enter toward the latter part of 20s, but they failed. In domestic markets, it's still okay. But the problem was if you print too much money without a reserve of gold, internationally countries may not trust your currencies. So foreign trade was becoming a bit of a problem. In 1944, a meeting was called in New Hampshire in USA in a place called Bretton Woods. So it's famously called the Bretton Woods Conference. Some 44 countries assembled over there. And one of the items on the agenda was this international trade in absence of the gold standard. But one country had a lot of gold, and that is the USA. USA traditionally had lots of gold. Then during the First World War and the intervening period in the Second World War, they were the major suppliers of arms and ammunition. And folks, when war is going on, you don't trust the currencies much. So all the payments were made in gold. So Fort Knox in US is full of gold. Besides, due to war, etc., when there is uncertainty, many countries used to keep gold with the US because US was far away from the scene of the war. In short, America had a lot of gold. So in 1944, in the Bretton Woods conference, it was decided that the only country to keep gold and print money would be the US. And the rest of the world will trade in dollars. And whenever you want, you can take your currency to the US Treasury and they will exchange it with gold. This was decided in 1944, but by the time it got implemented, I think it was early 50s. Then the system came into operation. Then the year was 1971. The president of the US was Richard Nixon. Now, folks, you must understand that is the phase where the Vietnam War was still on. It started in the late 50s and went on till early to mid 70s. So in the thick of Nixon's presidency, the war was on. When a war is going on, countries need to print a lot of money. And if US prints money without control, then the world may lose confidence in their currency and they may come rushing to exchange their dollar holdings with gold. So they have to be careful. And Mr. Nixon had become president with a bit of difficulty. He lost once, then he got elected, and now his re-election was round the corner. And again, if you want to make sure you get elected, you have to keep your voters happy. If you want them to be happy, you need to give them good roads and bridges and airports, and again, you need money. So all Richard Nixon's advisors advised him, don't print money. Internationally, it might create problems. But Mr. Nixon didn't want any chance of losing the elections. So guys, in 1971, Mr. Richard Nixon got up and said, even US will not keep gold. US exited the gold standard. To my mind, since 1971, the dollar has no moral right to be the world's reserve currency. But it continues. It continues because there doesn't seem to be an alternative. Prior to the dollar, what was the world reserve currency? It was the British pound. British pound lost relevance in 1913 when they exited the gold standard. But you couldn't find a substitute in 1944. In 1971, I think the same situation happened to the dollar. But till date, there has been no substitute. So one wonders what will happen. Lots of realignment is going on right now. I think we are in for a very, very turbulent near future. Lots of changes might happen. Plenty of realignment will happen. Already the world is moving away from the dollar gradually, bit by bit. So one wonders what kind of impact will that have on the American economy? What power does it give the US being the world reserve currency? You know, in one of my earlier videos, I told you when we talked about the government budget, that if India wants to spend and it doesn't have the money, well, it can print. What can India print? India can print rupees. What use are rupees for? For domestic spending. But if India wishes to import, then you need dollars. So you got to earn the dollar. So if you want to import, you must export. And if your exports fall short of imports, if you have a trade imbalance, if you have a current account deficit, then if you want to import, you'll have to buy dollars in the open market. If you have to buy dollars, you sell rupees. You create a demand for dollars, you create a supply for rupee, dollar becomes stronger, rupee becomes weaker, etc., etc. But America is allowed to print dollars. So what power does it give them? They can print the currency that they need for domestic spending as well as for international spending. So it gives them unlimited power. So one shudders to think, what if one day they lose that status?